was only less than a week ago that we had the SCOTUS decisions, which is why my guest tonight, Chris Geidner, is here to guide us. I'm going to call you Chris Geidner to guide us through what happened with SCOTUS. Chris is the publisher of the Law Dork newsletter here on is it on Substack? I'm assuming
Yeah.
everything's on Substack
Yes.
now here on Substack. So we've been so immersed in the budget bill that a lot of people might have forgotten that on Friday, SCOTUS came out and dropped a lot of decisions that have affected a lot of people. So the constitutional crisis that we're in feels pretty dire. So can you just catch us up for everybody who is going, oh my God, that was last Friday, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was last Friday, and it was a little earlier than some of us thought because we went into Thursday still with, I think, like 10 decisions.
Mhm.
And at the end of Thursday's decisions, the Chief Justice announced that Friday would be the last day. And so that meant we were going to be getting six on Friday, which obviously is what we got. Five decisions because they announced that the gerrymandering case, the case over redistricting, was going to be moved over to be re-argued next fall. But we got several of these big decisions on Friday, including the decision that was really not a decision over what we thought it might be about, but was a big decision over nationwide injunctions, but also means that now, while we would normally go into sort of summer recess, because the Supreme Court said that there was this 30-day stay on the birthright citizenship order before it goes into effect, we're now already neck deep in litigation in at least five cases across the country, and we'll probably have more in the coming days over sort of what the Supreme Court left for people to use to challenge the birthright citizenship order. And that is going to be going through the courts over this next month, even now that we're done with the term, and will almost certainly be back to the Supreme Court before July 26th, when that's supposed to, when that's the deadline that they set. So
So
while we're done, we're not done.
Well, I was gonna say, so it feels like there's no rest for anyone whatsoever. It's an onslaught, if you will. They didn't have to
Yeah,
drop all those decisions when they did, but they decided to. But backing up a little bit for people to really
yeah,
understand what's at stake with the birthright citizenship decision, because it was more about the injunctions. I think a lot of people don't even have this vocabulary at hand. So
yeah.
really quickly, what is a injunction? What is a
Yeah.
nationwide injunction?
So when Donald Trump issued this executive order that basically would end birthright citizenship for a few classes of people, mainly, I mean, for people who uh, don't have citizenship and are here, even some who are here legally, um, and for anybody who's here illegally, he issued it. It was immediately challenged in several lawsuits, including organizational lawsuits and for some multi-state lawsuits that states issued their own, joined together. There were two groups of states, one on the East Coast, one on the West
Mhm.
Coast, that filed lawsuits challenging it. And what happened was that this is really unconstitutional. The text of the 14th Amendment makes that clear, that anybody who is subject to the laws of the United States, born in the United States, has citizenship. The history of the Supreme Court had ruled more than 100 years ago that this applies even to people who are not here legally, that to their children. The Congress passed a law that made clear that they agreed with those Supreme Court rulings and put that into their understanding of the Immigration and Nationality Act.
Mhm.
So this is something that until January 20th, 2025, nobody had thought like could even be an issue before courts. And so when these challenges got to judges, you even had like Republican appointed judges getting them and saying, as the judge in Seattle said, like this is clearly unconstitutional. And so rather than sort of piecemeal dealing with it because it involves immigration, because it involves birth certificates, because it involves national citizenship, these judges said the only way to properly deal with this is to enjoin it nationwide. Now, that means that you didn't need 5,000 lawsuits. You didn't need everybody going to court because when New Jersey's led lawsuit that was in Massachusetts got its court order, it barred the Trump administration from enforcing it at all. But the Trump administration appealed not that whole ruling, which is
Mhm.
what you would normally do. You would say, no, we disagree with that injunction. Um, what they did is they just challenged the scope of the injunction. They said, we don't think you can issue a district court judge can't issue a nationwide injunction. And the Supreme Court took that up and heard arguments over that in May. And that was the decision that we got on Friday that Justice Barrett wrote for the court and said DOJ is right. And you can't have nationwide injunctions. Now, there might be times, and this is where it gets complicated.
It
There
was
might be,
already complicated, Chris,
there
just so
might
you
be,
know.
the, yeah, there might be times when in order what she said was you can get complete relief to a plaintiff before a court. So I sue,
Mhm.
Chris Geidner sues. And um like the example that is used is like I sue over nuisance. I sue because there's a business next to my apartment that operates later than DC regulations say they can operate, and they're causing noise that is keeping me up, and it's
Mhm.
beyond when the city says businesses can operate that loudly. I get an injunction against that business, it's going to benefit other people because there are other neighbors who were forced to stay up.
Mhm.
And what she said is you can issue injunctions that might reach other people because it's necessary to provide complete relief to the plaintiff.
Mhm.
And that is now going to be fought out everywhere because when those states went to court, when New Jersey went to court with the group of states that were suing, they actually said they didn't ask for a nationwide injunction just saying, we want you to bar this from enforcement against all. What they said is that in order to give us complete relief, in order to protect our citizens, in order to protect people, our residents, in order to protect families who live in New Jersey, we need this to be nationwide because people travel, because there is a constitutional right to travel. So, therefore, there are New Jersey residents who travel and might happen to have an early pregnancy, an early childbirth. They might go into labor early and not be home. And they're in North Dakota, which didn't file a lawsuit. And so, does that mean that a child born there to a New Jersey resident isn't a US citizen under this ruling? Um, and so that's now got to be fought out before July 26th when the Supreme Court said this goes into effect. They
So
also said that there's class action lawsuits
Mhm.
that even though we're getting rid of nationwide injunctions, you can have class action lawsuits, which people are familiar with. That's like when you get together a lot of people who are harmed by a product,
Mhm.
and you say, we're not going to make every person harmed by this product sue. You can get a class action lawsuit together that's certified. And that takes additional steps, but the court said that's still available. And we now have multiple lawsuits that are pending, challenging the birthright citizenship order, trying to get classes certified. So
Mhm.
all of this now has to happen between now and July 26th because that's the deadline the Supreme Court set.
So when you say all of this is a lot and none of it was necessary. None of it was what people were expecting to happen. And so
Yeah.
I find when we have a government that is the most transparent administration in all in all of American history, when they say they want to be about efficiency and cutting costs, it sounds to me like the entirety of this is about increasing problems, increasing bureaucracy, making it miserable for people who are not documented, but also for all the other civil rights that they plan to attack. Because
Yeah.
it seems like they're just going to go down the line one after the other. And because of the nationwide injunction, it sounds like we'll have rights in some states. And so is that how the Constitution is supposed to work, where we have rights in some states and not in other states? And
No, we actually created an amendment to get rid of that, the 14th Amendment. Um, in addition to the 13th and 15th Amendment, the Civil War amendments, they were supposed to take care of that, and it is sort of this minimalist interpretation of those amendments by the conservatives on the court that is part of the way that what you're doing is coming about, but that what you're saying is coming about. But you're absolutely right. What this decision does is, um it makes it so that if you are not, and this came through both in Justice Sotomayor's dissent and
Mhm,
Justice Jackson's dissent on Friday, if you don't have the ability, the knowledge, the financing, the resources, the time, the awareness to bring a lawsuit
mhm.
and to carry that out. If you don't live in a state where you have a Democratic attorney general who's going to file lawsuits against the Trump administration, uh, you just aren't going to get the protections of the Constitution. And that was in Justice Sotomayor's dissent, that she said that this essentially turns the Constitution, the idea of constitutional protections, on its head, because without the ability for a judge to issue an injunction that binds the government against everyone, which is
Mhm.
all that a nationwide injunction is. They tried to make it sound all scary, but it just like literally says, in when you're talking about nationwide injunctions against the government, you're talking about in order that government officials follow the law as to everyone, which seems like it should be like a fundamental thing that judges can do.
Well,
And
especially now that you have a president who has immunity on official decisions. And so it feels like, am I wrong in guessing or saying that they are going to take advantage of this going forward and continue to attack civil liberties? And so, my question, and I'm sure a lot of people watching, are what comes next? And is there any way to stop this?
I mean, what comes next is the smart lawyers who have been challenging the Trump administration in all sorts of ways, are going to recalibrate. They are going to look through the various opinions. Justice Kavanaugh wrote a concurring opinion that essentially said, like, it is possible for the court to decide the Supreme Court to decide matters quickly and within a matter of weeks, and that they should do that. And that was also a question that, although he didn't write anything on Friday, that Chief Justice Roberts raised at oral arguments. And so if you put together the two of them with the three Democratic appointees, that's 5 votes. That's a majority, to at least say that it is possible for when these issues happen, whether they're being raised on an individual plaintiff basis, whether they're being raised by 5 states, whether they're being raised in a class action, however, whatever ways these lawyers who are leading challenges against Trump figure out their path forward is, the Supreme Court, at least Roberts at arguments and Kavanaugh in his concurrence, have sort of given the go ahead flag to say, we will hear your arguments for why we need to at least issue an interim ruling, that once you do get a Supreme Court ruling, even if it is in a case only applying to 5 people, if it's a Supreme Court ruling, it then is nationwide. Like it isn't a judgment, which
Mhm.
means, for people who don't understand that, it doesn't mean that, like, that you could hold somebody in contempt for not following it, but it does mean that if anybody else brings litigation, judges, no matter if it's the most right wing judge who wants to side with Trump, if the Supreme Court has ruled, they are bound by that ruling. So you would be able to then at least get quick relief.
So for the people who can't get relief, because right now people are scrambling,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking about Scrimeti, that decision, and we
Yes.
talked a little bit about that before the show. Can you enlighten people on what that would mean, not just for trans people, but for other people? Because I often will take language from one decision and
Mhm.
apply that sort of precedent to another decision. So can you talk about how everybody's rights are uh, at stake here?
Yeah. I mean, everybody is definitely right now looking through their lawsuits, deciding whether they need to file an amended complaint to make it a class action lawsuit, to add more plaintiffs so that they can get greater coverage of any injunction. Um, and like, when you look at Scrimeti specifically, what you've got is this, I mean, very bad ruling, that there's just no way to sugarcoat it, that essentially said, we're going to look at these laws with a different lens than any common sense reading. I mean, what I've said talking with people about this ruling, if you talked with anybody in Tennessee, if you talked with 100 people in Tennessee, whatever their view is of the law, about who the law targets, not at least 99, if not all 100 of those people would have said trans people,
Mhm.
trans kids. And yet, what you got from Roberts was a ruling that said this doesn't classify based on sex or transgender status, which is absurd. And yet what it means is that that lawyers are going to have to go back to the drawing board, are going to have to see what areas the court left open, what issues the court didn't resolve. And there were some. And so there will be, and I've written a little bit about it at Law Dork. I know our mutual acquaintance Chase Strangio has talked about it
Mhm.
on Instagram and elsewhere. Um, and there will be continued fights in the courts, but there's also just a reality that I know Chase has talked about a lot. That, like, particularly when it comes to trans people, the court has made it very clear that they are not prioritizing protecting trans people, and protections for trans people are going to need to be fought out in communities, in state houses, amongst the communities of queer people who were protecting trans people before there were any protections in law for them.
So
And yeah.
This makes me think back to when I believe it was Marjorie Taylor Greene who first started calling for a national divorce. Is this, in a way, the administration's attempt to create two different Americas? An America that is
I
the
mean,
America of red states and one that is of blue states?
there's definitely an attempt to give red states the ability to restrict as many rights as they want and protect them from those restrictions, and then to be able to have the Trump administration challenge blue states when they tried to provide protections. Looking at the Trump administration lawsuit, I don't even remember days anymore. I think it was Monday
Neither do I.
against California,
Hmm.
against either California or Los Angeles, trying to say that they were making it impossible for the Trump administration to enforce the law there. So that's one example. Some of the Trump executive orders trying to restrict um, uh, gender affirming care to anyone, and saying that they were going to tie it to funding decisions. Now there have been lawsuits and those have led to injunctions, but another that's another example. Those I don't think any of those were uh class action lawsuits.
Hmm.
Some of them were organizational lawsuits, and that's another group that like can get broader protection, because like I think one of the lawsuits had like a medical group. And so maybe the litigation, if they have members at every hospital, that essentially you would be able to get an injunction that would protect all of the hospitals because there are members within all of those hospitals. Um, but that's another area where um, the Trump administration is trying to threaten hospitals' funding, and the Supreme Court is making it difficult to even challenge that unconstitutional funding restriction. And now the lawyers who have brought those lawsuits, there's one in Maryland and one in Washington State that I know of, are going to go back to at least look at those injunctions and see whether they withstand the CASA decision. And
So,
DOJ will certainly be going and trying to cut them back.
well, and so that's the part that is scaring me because I'm seeing, for example, and it's kind of flying under the radar. And it was maybe yesterday or the day before that the DOJ decided to go in and withhold funding from, or maybe it was the Department of Education decided to
Education,
withhold,
yeah.
yes, the Department of Education withholding funding from departments, from schools, districts, like nationwide, and they were supposed to all receive their funding. And this is money that had already been allocated, and this is from previous budgets that was to be dispersed on July 1st. How does the decision affect these different districts' ability to get the money that is owed to them to be able to fund the schools?
Yeah, so this is another one of those, what during the first administration, Trump administration, my editor used to call this part of the Constitution you never thought you would need to know about or want to know about. Um, this time it's called impoundment. And that's when the executive doesn't just keeps money that Congress has allocated. If you look at what our system is supposed to be, the executive is executing things.
Right.
The executive in the reality is that the executive isn't supposed to be deciding a lot. The executive branch is supposed to be carrying out the will of Congress. And appropriations are when Congress gives specific money. And once Congress appropriates funds, that is funding that the government that the executive branch has a directive, a legal directive to spend. And this is now essentially, there have been some impoundment cases, some of the stuff with foreign aid and USAID at the beginning of the Trump administration raised those questions. And the fact is, the Trump administration lost on those cases
Mm,
and started distributing funds. Um, a new judge, Judge Amir Ali, got the case. He was one of Biden's last confirmed appointees. He got that case and has really done a great job of methodically going through and forcing the State Department and USAID to carry out the contracts that had already been awarded. And now we're going to see a much bigger version of that. That I think the interesting element of that, one of the problems with the foreign aid funding state USAID cases is that oftentimes the beneficiaries were foreign parties.
mm.
And so it was harder unless it was a US nonprofit organization that was getting the money, then they could sue. And so that happened, but it like made it much more complicated when you're talking about foreign aid. But this, we're talking about school districts across the country. We're also going to be talking about school districts in red states. We're going to be talking about school districts in Republican members of Congress's district. So, in some ways, I think we're going to find that this was a situation where Linda McMahon's lack of qualification to be running the Department of Education is really gonna bite them, because that is clear impoundment. You're going to have lawsuits, and you're gonna probably see some surprising people mad at the Trump administration. Some of these, like the story the of the like, well, we didn't think she was going to be deported. We didn't think our school district was going to lose funding.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been very myopic, very short-sighted about how this is going to affect them. And so when I saw that news come out, and I also saw the timing of it, because it's right when school districts are kind of winding things down for the year and taking a short break before they're able to, start putting things together for the upcoming school year. And now, instead of enjoying their summers and enjoying their families, they're also scrambling. And so it
They're
feels
going to
part
be,
of
yep,
this mission that the Trump administration seems to have, which is to keep the chaos going so that no one can actually do the business of living and just
yeah.
having a life. We're just in this
No,
constant fight.
I mean, n- yeah. I mean, think about I mean, putting aside anything else, think about the difficulties that schools, I mean, any school administrator who had to deal with the pandemic is now just over the hump with getting a full class of people who didn't have to go through a year of college, a year. I mean, we're talking about K through 12 here, but like, I mean, a new high school that didn't have to go through a year of remote learning, and now they're having to deal with, we're not getting our federal funding. It's truly, I mean, it's horrifying on its face. It's alarming for those school districts, but I mean, from a legal perspective, it is truly one of those situations where, like, it does look to me like the administration bit off more than they can chew.
Do you think this is an attempt where they'll gonna, turn the levers back on for the districts that comply with some of their executive orders attacking, LGBTQ students or DEI, and they're going to make it more difficult for those
Right.
districts to get their funding back, but for the red districts, they're like, here you go, here's your money.
I mean, I don't think you're probably going to see some attempts at that, but the good thing is that I think that we will see that the way that this falls out, there won't be an ability to really do that, because the the legal issue is so clearly the same across. There will be no legal distinction, and
Mhm.
so the ability to uh they would almost make a word like it's sort of like from the frying pan into the fire. If like
Mm.
you go from impoundment and then an equal protection violation because you're turning on some school districts and not others, like it's like, okay, well, you're just adding another cause of action to the lawsuit.
Okay, so this actually sounds like good news. I like to end the show on like a hopeful note. And so it sounds to me, and you can tell me, be truthful, be honest with me. It sounds to me like the courts are still holding, they're still doing their job, even under the pressure of authoritarianism.
I mean, I think the district courts are doing an incredible job. I think that it's really I mean, I have the privilege of at Law.org having that's my full-time job, and I have all these people um who help me be able to do this for my job, and I'm listening. I'm not just covering the Supreme Court. I'm listening to attending when they're in DC. These district court hearings. I last year went down to Alabama for a hearing, and like district court judges in over the past 5.5 months have done an incredible job of holding the administration accountable for their actions, forcing them when they are brought into court to answer questions, to provide evidence, and then they tend to lose. Now the reality is that when it gets up to the appeals courts, depending on which appeal court, it's a more mixed bag. And when it gets up to the Supreme Court, there's normally at least a partial win for the administration. And so, like, altogether, it's a little alarming. But I think the reality is that these district court judges are what a district court judge does in a big sense is make a record.
Mm.
The That's where trials are held. That's where evidence is actually submitted. That's where experts testify. That's where one of the things that a district court judge is compile findings of fact in a part of their ruling. And what that does is something that's so important in this moment because that's the truth. And no matter what happens when it goes up on appeal, like, first of all, I think they're doing such a good job that they are, like in that example that I told you about USAID and the State
Mhm.
Department funding. Like Judge Ali did such a good job with providing, making sure the facts were in the record that even the U.S. Supreme Court had to say, yeah, like you need to do this. And like, so you're getting some of that through, and even when they are, like what we talked about, this main issue with the birthright citizenship case and the nationwide injunctions, what they ruled on was not the citizenship order yet.
Mhm.
Because that any judge who has ruled on the merits of that, even in a preliminary fashion, has said, no, this is clearly unconstitutional.
Mhm.
And I think that the fact that another example is Trump's executive orders targeting law firms. We've
Mm.
now had four different district court judges appointed by presidents of both parties, all of whom have decided as a final judgment in the case that the orders are completely unconstitutional. They struck them down in full and said they can't be enforced, and that has
That's a
held
win.
as of now. The Trump administration didn't even like do the I think they know that these I think even Pam Bondi and this Justice Department know these are unconstitutional. They didn't do their normal routine of immediately appealing and going up to the Supreme Court on the shadow docket and asking for a quick ruling. They 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 actually held off. The federal government has 60 days to appeal. Normal people have 30 days. The federal government has 60 days to appeal. They literally waited until the 59th day to appeal the first of those decisions against them because I think they know that they're going to lose and they don't want to make Trump mad because they know they're not going to be able to get a win there.
But he's of course expecting them to appeal it anyway, and which is
Right.
which is just so freaking wild. But I am glad to hear that the district court judges are at least holding the line, that it's slowing things down, which allows people who are working in different nonprofits
Yeah.
in different areas to be able to catch up. I think a lot of everything right now is
Well,
like,
and look at
please just
the
slow things down.
all of the litigation. You're exactly right. And I think look at the litigation challenging some of the firings, the
Mm,
mass firings.
mm,
They've won on those because they've been done so poorly. And because of that, what that literally means is that there are tens of thousands of people across the country who are federal employees who are still getting paychecks because of these injunctions.
uh-huh.
And the Trump administration did try with those up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, we're still waiting on a ruling on that, and Trump might eventually win. Maybe they'll give him a win tomorrow, tonight, something. But it's been, since the original order on those was, I think, the beginning of May. And so
Uh-huh.
it's basically been
Wh-
2 months that litigation. That's 2 months of paychecks for workers, 2 months of health insurance for their
mhm.
families that they didn't have to worry about finding health insurance, finding a new job. And also, even if they think they're eventually gonna lose their job, they now have had 2 months to start looking. And I think so that's a huge credit to those lawyers behind those cases.
Well, and I think even as you say, that feels like so long ago now in this
Yeah.
administration's years. It feels like
Years, this
uh,
administration's years.
it does feel like patience is the word of the day. We have to be able to outlast them. We have to be able to sustain the fight. So I'm grateful for you being here and joining Punching Up tonight.
Yeah.
That way, we have a better understanding of what are we waiting for. And it seems like we're
No.
waiting for I love that the stuff about entering it onto the record. Yes, because they are constantly trying to erase the record in other places, but this is one place where they can't just delete a
Yep.
database. And so these are all good things that can help sustain us and help sustain the hope is that it's going on record. We're winning a lot of these cases, and hopefully, in the most egregious of cases, they're going to start to realize that we're not going to let them get away with this, and that's what's giving me hope. So,
Yeah.
uh, so thank you for joining me. You are, of course, welcome back
Thank
anytime
you.
because you are a fountain of knowledge. I wish I would have taken
Thank you
notes.
so much.
I hope everyone at home did. And yes, and people can find you on the Law Dork. Where
Law
else?
Dork, yep. And my main social platform is Blue Sky, and I'm Chris Geidner there. And but I have accounts everywhere, and it's all under Chris Geidner or Law Dork News, Law Dork News on Instagram. And yeah,
Perfect.
just
Well,
wherever you go for your news, if you look for Chris Geidner or Law Dork News, you'll probably find me.
okay. Well, so we're all going to be Law Dork followers now because I
Please.
feel like I just went to like a mini law school course, and so everybody find Chris Geidner, get the knowledge, follow me at Maya on stage on all platforms, and we'll see you guys next week. All right. Bye.